use of the custom workflow actors in Info Input using the Azure Translation Workflow Demo project. So we'll follow the instructions generally in this document and give an idea of how you can integrate a custom workflow actor into Info Input. So the first thing in the document, it talks about a translation project using Microsoft. And we have some prerequisites, which is a Gradle project, the sample demo project. We have to deploy the project libraries, and we have to perform configuration in Azure for the API that we're going to call. If we just scroll down, we have the Azure configurations at the top of the document, and you just follow the steps in here to create a translator resource. So if we look at in Azure, I've created a translator resource inside my Azure account, and I then have gone through and I've copied various pieces of information that it's asking for, which you can get by navigating to these locations. So you can get your translation key, the translation endpoint, and you want the document translation for this demo, and one of the API keys from this keys and endpoint section. And you also need to create a storage account. So in Azure, I have also a storage account, in this case, our Blob pre-sales account. And you can then get once again, the endpoints for this account to add into the job configuration when you get to that stage. So once you've done your Azure configuration following these steps, and we'll just scroll down, you would then get your Gradle installation, and you can download that. So if I look at this server, so I've downloaded Gradle 8.7 to a folder, and I also have the sample project that's provided for the Azure integration, which has a build Gradle and a settings Gradle. What I had to do with the build Gradle was just to change the installation directory to where my Info Input solution was configured on this system. So that's required to get access to the libraries. If you get any compiling errors, it may be because this folder is not correct. So we've got our build. Sorry, didn't mean to click that. So we have our build Gradle build available, and if I come back to my server and we look at the folder, let me just minimize that. So we would literally just do a Gradle build within this folder, which will build project, and under distributions you will then get the zip file, which has, so you get the jar and the libs, which in this case I've just zipped into a file so I can copy to my other system. So that you will have the jar file and your lib file available to you. And if I look at the actual code, so this is the source code for doing the API calls to Azure for the translation service. And you can use these functions to give an idea of how the API works in conjunction with the developer guide, which is in the Info Input Solution SOC folders, which lists the custom workflow actors section 3.8, and that details how you use the APIs and how you would amend them to do whatever API calls that you want to do. So for now, because we're using the translation demo, we can just use the functions and the code that's already existing. So what we've done is we've just downloaded the Gradle build tools. We've created and built the project, and then we have to deploy the dependencies. So as it says here, it compiles to the zip, and then after all is compiled, you would go to your info input solution folder under server, under webinf, and then under xlib, and you would create a folder called Azure Translation Workflow Actor, and in there you would put your jar and all the library files that have been built with the jar. So you would need to restart your Apache Tomcat server service after you put the files in this location, which is also mentioned in the installation guides. So it tells you about the final directory structure should be the jar and the lib inside that folder, and you do the restart. And then you can start to build your job. So if we go to the job configuration, and I'll go to my info input solution. So if we come into job setup, so we have, I've just created a translation job, and I'll go into the properties. And what I did was I clicked edit workflow and just copied and pasted the functions from the Word document. So the lines from the Word document for the XML for the workflow. And what this does is it adds the translation workflow step with parameters already defined. So for your integration to your API, you can change what these parameters are. You can add them, remove them, etc. to suit your environment and your API call. And if we go into the translation, so this adds a translation step to the workflow. And if we edit the step, then we have our make this a bit smaller. So we have our all our keys for doing the API call. So these are the parameters that we've said in the workflow. We have those listed in here. For the language, I had to use the language code, and I have all of the other details for the specifics to both upload the files to blob storage and then run the translation. So you just add your workflow step parameters in the job. You would then save the job and you would publish it. And then your job is available. So then we would go to info input solution and we could run a translation. I won't show that working, but because it will take several minutes. But if we just go to batch manager, then we can see we have one here already. When you upload the file, you would see the step would go to the translation. And what it does is it will sit there for the period defined in the parameter. And that parameter is the get status interval. So the default is 5 minutes, but basically you can set this interval and the API will just sit there. Well, the batch will sit there. And then when that interval is up, it will then check to see whether, in this case, the translation has been done. And then once it's got a success back, in this case from Microsoft, we would then just open the batch. And what we've done is we translated from an English brochure to a French brochure. So basically we've done our process, we've translated, and then you could move on and do whatever you like with that document. So just as a recap, let's go back to this document. So we've looked at the workflow. We've then gone into the properties and set the parameters for the workflow step that was added. And it describes here what those parameters are. So the only thing to be aware of is this one seems to need the language code rather than the name for the language you're translating to. And you just populate your variables, and then the workflow is called, and the batch will sit waiting for the interval time to keep checking to see whether the API has finished its work. And that is the summary for using the custom workflow actor.